I will post this to, or share it and post it. But it, as I said, this is not crucial because I gave everybody that turned in an ERD of any kind all the points. Right? So, but anyway, this is the top of the receipt, and these are the line items on it. So the order ID ties it to the order. And then we would have probably the item ID, item size. Now this is why I'm not sure. It might be better to have a different key here because I have to repeat both of those. You want to change the key there? If we don't, then what I'd have to do is say item ID and size ID, which is a little bit redundant. Because these are both part of the primary key of the other one, so they both have to be repeated.
How do we change it?
The way to change it would be, so I'm going to get rid of the PK part of this. And then up above this, I'm going to add a field above. Primary key doesn't have to be the first field, but, and then I will do item size. Item size ID, and then I will do instead of doing, I just do item size ID. So to give you the item and the size. This probably makes more sense since it has to be. And then this one I would just delete. Now you probably also want to know quantity, right? Anything else you want to know on the details?
I had a preparation style for their options.
That might be where you can do the custom stuff, right? I'm going to call it prep notes, which is just for any kind of customization. I don't think you get it any cheaper if you say you don't want pickles, right?
No.
All right, so order ID to order ID, item size ID to item size ID. Let's go down. Then I'll just move that. Now, I didn't redo the price here, so the price is here. The price will be associated with everything in here. You can, with the software, I know this is hard to see because I got it so zoomed. With the software in programming, you could come here, get the price for every one of these that's listed here, and add them all up, plus tax. Plus, and some of you had this, which actually might be a good thing to put on the order itself. So I'm going to add one more field. Dine in. You know why they ask you that? The tax is different if you eat in versus if you take it out.
Because of like using more goods there, like.
I'm not sure why there's more taxes if you eat in. So in Washington, I think there's food takeout is different than food you take home to eat is considered different than food you eat in the restaurant. I think it's just a way to tax more. But I do know they tax differently for eating in the restaurant than for, although that being said, I've never seen any difference in what the restaurant charges. Have you? I mean, I think
maybe
it's
a tax that's paid by the restaurant.
Yeah, I think the restaurant has to pay. Well, they could make you pay it, but I don't think they want a nickel and dime every order like that.
Yeah.
But they mark
I know, for example, with sugary beverages, at my work, our business pays a tax when we buy sodas from soda distributors, beverage distributors.
And the price will just pass along.
Yeah, so it influences the price we list, but it's completely obscure. Like the consumer would not know based on the price that there was a change in, or that the tax was there.
Yeah.
Well, some places have, like Dick's, they have listed under their beverages, they'll have, their sodas, but then they also have items that don't have sugar in them. And so there's a separate part of the menu that says if you order something that has sugar, there's like this much tax added per size.
Yeah, but that's, the state isn't getting that differential. Instead, they're choosing to charge the customer more to help cover their costs. Yeah.
By the nickel and dime.
Are there any, let me zoom down just a little. Anything else? This is real basic. As I said, we're not trying to, real database might have much more complexity than that. But this gives sort of the basic idea. Questions on this, so, and anything else that is essential that we're leaving out?
I have a question.
Yeah.
On the items I field, is that just an extraneous relationship, or am I not following?
Which is an extreme.
The little U one from the primary key to the item ID.
That's not actually the same line. So the outgoing one is going
Is it?
down to, it's going down
the
to
table?
item size ID in the order details table.
You just,
Okay,
So if it was a U, that is possible.
right, and I thought that it.
No, that it is possible to do a table that relates to itself, but yeah, that's not what's happening there. One of the things you can do here, I don't know that it makes much sense with any other kind of diagram, but you could do auto layout hierarchy,
that's what I was doing.
and it will create a layout for you that is usually fairly readable. So up into a range, auto layout hierarchy.
It doesn't take into consideration like trying to fit it all on the same screen.
No.
So,
It just lays them out kind of top to bottom by relationships, but it does tend to untangle the lines. Now, if you wanted to generalize this again, which actually might be a really good exercise, you would want to probably add things like customers. You'd probably want to add something like an employee. Even in this, they might have employee login things, right? It is possible that they would have an employee login into this.
It helps when tracking cash that goes in.
Yeah, it does.
Slow down the till.
So, I mean, there are lots of other things we could add. Employee makes sense. Customer makes sense if you want to expand it. Again, like pizza places do keep track of the customers generally, particularly if they deliver.
there's basically like a rewards program.
Yeah, and if you're generalizing it, a lot of places have rewards. Although I think a lot of them, they like to issue the little cards because people lose them, so they don't get their rewards. Rather than track them in what?
I think now it's all this apps. Everything is moving from cards to.
And if it's on an app, then it's probably in a database, right? Your apps, typically the phone apps talk to a local database, which is then transferred to a internet database somewhere. So yeah, I mean, it's fairly common that the data in your app you can also see on the web, right? Which is scary in some ways.
Could you clarify when we were doing the first version of one of these, you did connections between the top titles of the boxes of the tables to others, and now of course we're doing it by primary keys.
Well, you always do primary key to foreign key.
Okay.
Now, in the diagram itself, though, notice that these move, and that's perfectly fine. These do not have to point at the field; they just point at the box. And what they're telling you is that one size can have many, so there can be many different items that are medium size, basically. And one item can have several sizes, one to many, one to many. It doesn't necessarily tell you which is the foreign key. And in fact, a lot of diagramming tools don't have any way to label foreign keys in the boxes.
See, if I wasn't clear what all of the when you click on one of the connectors, you can do the drop-down boxes on the upper right.
Oh, so you can
There's
change.
lots of endings there.
Yeah, you do have lots of endings here. So if I click on a line, I could change the, actually it's over here. I could change the ending. My line isn't selected again.
And now
There are lots of these, and I don't really care about most of them.
the one on the left is where it starts, though, right? The one on the right is where it ends.
Yeah, so this is one to many. So you usually start at the one and
So
get down to
the
many.
one box you're in now on the left is.
Yeah.
What we could represent the problem of the hamburger size by doing 1 to 0 or many. Or sorry.
You could, although the thing is, so
0 or 0 to.
right. So if you put a 0 there, that means it's 0 or like this is 1 or 0 down
1
here.
or 0, yeah.
The thing is, you can do all that in the design, but the database doesn't enforce it.
Yeah.
No database enforces them, so I don't
It's
care
just
about
It's
it.
just like a note to yourself.
Yeah, it's just a note. It could be a note that's relevant to the software prep, right? Because then that's where the rules will start to be enforced. But the database doesn't enforce cardinality. A lot of database theorists have tried to, partially they just, there are ways to enforce it, but it involves writing triggers and things like that, which we're not going to do. If you did the SQL, right? So we did some triggers, but you can do triggers if you wanted to say, it's not really relevant to this, but if for some reason you said that nobody could have more than 5 items on an order, you could write a trigger that when they order more, when on the 5th line of an insert, it would say no, it would stop it, right? Nobody would do that.
We don't want to sell anything for you.
You do though, like if this was a library database, there's usually a limit on how many books you can check out.
Or some like events, like I don't know, like sporting events, you can only purchase so much alcohol in one transaction.
There's that, or you could also that triggered a thing. Some shows you're only allowed so many tickets.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So you could do a trigger that's basically checks how many you have recorded as open, and if you go, for every new insert, it'll check again. And when it finds that you have exceeded or met the limit, then it will return a message that you can't do anymore. That's what triggers are good for, but they're basically programming, right, in SQL. Or actually with Postgres, you can do them in Python. We're not going to, but you can. Other things about the ERD before.
Should I have the item ID in the order?
They don't need to know the item ID. No, the order is in the item. So I did the item size, which contains the item. So there's a 3-step thing there. There's the item size, and then the item size is what's matched in the order. So this would be, I don't know, a Big Mac meal, large, and that's what would be passed to here is the size, the item and the size. What changes, I don't know if you need to, when it's large, the sandwich doesn't change size. It's just they give you more fries because potatoes cost nothing. French fries and sodas are pennies, so they can give you those and waste them and not cost much. The meal, you may, if you're not a vegan anyway or a vegetarian, the meal that costs the restaurant the most is like a steak. There's very little. They basically break even when you count the price of the meat and the prep. They'll make their money on drinks at that point.
And that's why when you're making food at home, a steak is not an especially, it's not an especially like frugal choice at the grocery store compared to eating out. Like if you want a nice steak, then unless there's a sale,
You might as well eat it. Yeah, as long as you don't buy the beer and the drinks to go with it. That's where they make their money.
Why have a steak?
Yeah, why have a steak without the beer and the drinks? Yes.
without the wine, without the Bordeaux.
Yeah. Well, and the thing at that point, this has had nothing to do with this class, but it's cheaper to do it at home because the wine would be much cheaper. You pay as much for a glass as for a bottle sometimes.
Or you can bring your own wine and they can charge you a corkage fee, which is usually astronomical. $20 to open a bottle of wine.
Huh.
Well, it's better than the 300% upcharge that they that bottle would go for on their menu.
That's true.
Yeah. The most expensive meal I ever had was at Canlis.
You can
Canlis.
It's $300 for two of us.
It's worth it though.
It's very good. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very that's like.
It's the most expensive restaurant in Seattle.
Yeah.
What?
You should try Metropolitan.
I thought you said Chipotle grill.
Yeah, Metropolitan is good. It's cheaper than Canlis by quite a bit, but it's still expensive. Yes. Yeah. I have eaten there before when a business meeting there. Anyway, all of that's irrelevant.
Cocktails with like a 30-year-old Macallan bottling. If you just like order like you have a choice of whiskey if you order like a Manhattan, but I think it's like their default is like absurd what they use.
But that's all you gotta do anyway.
Everybody's looking at the canvas menu right now.
We're off the rails, dude.
Yeah, that's fine.
Filter.
That's fine. You're actually looking.
I'm
There's a
actually
video.
looking at the website. It's super pretty. Yeah.
Well, it is. It's a very nice restaurant. We went there for our 30th anniversary, something like that. So anyway, any final questions on this, and we'll go to the next topic. We might even take a break if you want. Since we've sort of taken a mental break anyway. Why don't we take till 2 a break, and then we'll start talking about the next topic, which is use cases.
I think it's very good.
Yeah, I'm easy to get off track some days.
Who's up for a whiskey cocktail?
That sounds good.
Yes.
Can you turn this picture to another?
Yeah, I'm going to save.
Which one?
Instead of directly.
I got a silver kitchen in there.
That's not what I wanted to do.
Oh wow.
It's not what I want to do either.
Yeah.
I was just trying to get it all in the frame, and then I'll make it a little smaller.
Probably depends on the meal, like what they're doing.
It's hard to get it all in the frame now that I did.
Maybe you can.
Oh yeah.
That's so cheap.
I work at a Total Wine, and we have there's a 150-year of tawny port
Oh wow!
that we retail for $2,500. But it's called Memories. So I would say so.
Yeah, that's a lot for a. We're still looking at cameras.
Oh, no. Canvas is for their actual business. They just are like, choose 4 courses, $135 flat. Give you an example. And I'm assuming, yeah, I'm assuming it's totally seasonal, it's not included. And a nice big fat clean also website.
So,
Do you think it might take a little while to figure out how to fix the password authentication issue?
it might, let's do a quick
I brought
search.
my laptop just in case, but I thought maybe it might be a little harder to figure out.
I'm not sure why it's not, I'm just gonna do Postgres, SQL, reset Postgres password, Windows.
Yes.
So here's up there, I mean, or you can look on this one. Yours might be 11. Did you download 11? What version did you download?
Of Postgres?
Yeah.
Oh,
So whatever, where it says
Yes.
9.1, it'll be whatever number you, that's fine, just whatever number you
that might have
download.
been, because I think when I downloaded it, it asked if I wanted to upgrade it or update it or something.
Oh.
I think that's what happened. Yes, I have 11.
So go into 11 and just see if you can find these files. And just change those two things to trust.
So search for the PGHBA.
Yeah. Is it in there? .conf, but it's not finding it.
No, it's not.
Do you have a thing where it's, so I would probably go into post, oh, you've got a Mac too.
Yeah, so
So let's look on, let's do that instead. Stack, well, they might have an answer or not. So this is, you are modifying that file. So this is in the command file, the command line, I think, for Mac.
So I can do it in terminal or?
I think so. Do you use sudo su Postgres? I don't know if this will work.
Try. Oh.
So it's asking you for the password
So
now,
I
though.
can change it to that password, right?
Is it asking you to change it, or is
No,
it,
it's
it's
just
just asking for
asking
the try it? No, so it's still not seeing the password. Can you do Postgres? If you do PSQL? What, the terminal?
Yeah.
Just close it and start it again. I don't know Macs. They're very mysterious to me.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
PSQL, try that.
Oh, sudo su?
No, just PSQL. Command not found. So
in that? Okay. So should I just try and research how to do a password reset?
Password reset on Mac. Yeah.
Okay. And then hopefully I can just figure it out and get that to connect.
Yeah, you're
Okay.
probably more likely to figure it out than me.
It'll just
Actually.
take time. I don't want to suck up all your time.
Oh,
Okay.
so
I'll just keep trying to do it.
there's lots of. So is this for the backup to PJ? So copy. They're talking about that.
That's actually.
Yeah.
So there's lots of articles. Yeah.
Okay, I'll give it a shot.
Okay.
Thank you.
So how many people are out still? I think we're starting on pretty soon.
My knees.
Okay. Give me just a minute and I'm gonna start.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm going to make a new different kind of chart here. We're going to start something different that the people passed. All right. We'll get going. I think it's still recording, which means that one, we started late and then it recorded through the break. What I might do, I think I told the other class, but I might have to switch to Panopto because YouTube is doing away with screen capture. When I looked at the new beta and they said how to do screen capture, they said download a third party. So you have to download something. And when I was looking at the third parties they recommended, they're all pretty much optimized for gaming. And that's not exactly what I want to do. So I probably will change to Panopto, even though I hate Panopto. One of my arguments of Panopto is that it'll only be available in Canvas, and I like that it's not available. I mean that it's available outside of Canvas. But I don't know when the change takes place for permanent. But the reason is that what I'm running are Hangouts, and Hangouts are going away, right? They killed Google Plus, and now Hangouts are going away too. Because nobody used Google Plus. All right, are we ready? What I want to do is a new, what? Oh, okay. So we got a little while. So I can probably do it through the summer. That's good because I need to learn how to use Panopto. I'm going to do a new document. And I am going to see what we have here. Yes, down here, when I did the new document, these are the templates. And I'm going down here. We want UML. UML is, as I said, it's a universal modeling language. And the idea was to kind of take all of the different kinds of diagrams that these businesses use to diagram systems and to diagram software, and to make a standard set of diagrams that would be communicated across systems easily. A lot of them can be transferred immediately into code if you have the right software. Visual Studio would do it. I don't know if it still does. There's some other software out there that can take these diagrams and actually turn them into code. And there's others that can take your code and turn them into diagrams. So we're not going to do that, but just to let you know that that's sort of the idea of universal modeling language, was to create because every company had its own version of a flowchart. Every company had their own different diagramming, and they wanted to make it more consistent and more universal. And a lot of these have, have kind of taken over. We're not going to do every UML model, but we're going to do some of the main ones. And I'm going to choose blank UML, and I'm going to create a document. And I want to kind of talk about this first part, which is, I'll actually label this. So instead of blank UML, I'm going to just say use cases. Use cases are, and let's zoom this a little bit. When I zoom it, I lose everything, so I have to figure out where I am. All right, so use cases are a type of diagram that are used to identify usually high-level requirements. So that you usually don't get in deep into the nitty-gritty on this, but you do high-level requirements. Use cases, in a way, are kind of like for whoever's doing the Agile report, they're similar to stories, where you tell a story about who somebody is going to use the software. All right, so what I'm going to do, so I don't think we have, I'm just wondering what diagrams they gave me. Shapes, UML class. So it has, down on the thing, it has all the different, there's a UML class, there's use case, which is what we're going to do. There's activity. There's UML sequence, component, deployment, entity relations, which are kind of another option for doing database diagrams. I'm going to do the use case first. And again, this is actually probably where you would start. Notice my gigantic actor right there before I put them on there. Stick figure. But the idea is that when you're talking about software and you're talking about requirements, you're talking about requirements in terms of who's using the software. How does any particular user relate to the software? Does that make sense? The user does not have to be human. So it could be like another system, like the ATM system could be using the sales system, or the sales system could be using the ATM. So it doesn't have to be human, but they often are. So I'm going to drag an actor on here. Now we're doing, again, for the in-class ones, mostly we're going to be doing that card, right? Where you swipe the card to get in. So we could do, let's just do a real simple thing here, and then we'll make some expansions on it. I can name the actor. What actor do we want to start with? Remember what? They shouldn't be that specific. They're more like general categories.
Teenager after school.
Teenager after school. Or you could do like staff.
This is for fast food now.
What?
We're doing fast food now, or are you doing key?
Key.
Okay, sorry.
The key, yeah. So let's do what? I didn't hear. Let's do staff. All right. So what ways, and I'm going to just drag a use case. A use case is just a bubble at this point. What, for staff, what does this key system, what do they have to be able to do?
Use it to access the room.
Right, so they want to access the room. And then typically what you do is you just draw a line. That's one of their uses. So a use case is just a bubble, right, that has a verbal phrase in it. They say verbal because it's something you do. Staff will use it to access the room. Is there anything else that a staff person needs to do with the system?
I think we had instructors versus custodians versus administration.
Right, so there'll be different actors, right? Yeah.
So staff is a little generic.
So do you want to do instructor then instead of staff? You might have, and this is actually debatable. I'm trying to get to the. You might have something like request access, particularly if the system has a way to do that. Like you can go onto a website and request access. The question is, this is where we'd have to decide on the business rules. Maybe only the dean can request access for an instructor, or or can the instructor have a request? Any thoughts on that? This is how simple use cases are, though. They are dead simple, but when you work these out, these can be really, really useful, even though they're very simple. And again, typically you go into the high level of things. So at the end of you created your application, you put in all the hardware and stuff, can an instructor access a room? It's a yes/no thing. It's something you can actually test, right? You can say yes or no. If they have permission to request access, can they make a request to the access? Let's do a more interesting one, and then I'll talk about some of the variations of this. I'm just going to move it down a little bit. Let's do security. What is the card access? What do we need to know? What does the system have to do for security?
Be notified.
So maybe alert.
Alert, yeah.
Let's for right now just say receive alerts. There's a second level of these which is written, which I will show you in a moment. What else might security need?
Force lock of the doors.
What?
Like automatically lock the doors. Shut the whole door.
Yeah, so let's do, I guess we could call it force lock. We could call it something else too, if you want. What else in security?
Access.
Right, so they need access too. So there's no sequence involved here. Do you know what I mean by that? It doesn't matter what order your use cases are in.
You would just use the existing access room.
No, you could. You could. So it depends on what you're doing. You could put like security over here, and they could both request access room. So you could do that. You could combine those two actors together. What else would
grant access?
So probably grant access.
Or would that be administrators?
I think security, at least here, the administrator can request the access, but security has to actually do it. That makes sense? You know what I'm going to do instead of grant, though? I'm going to be even more generic. Manage access, because they can also remove it, right? The lines just say that they're interacting. There are some other kinds of lines that I'll talk about in a moment. Anything else? Go ahead. One of the things that I think that all of these would require, if I can get this, so I'm going to put this out here, is for security, it would require that they are logged in. Right, so that they all, I want to show a different kind of,
Logged into what, from where?
Logged into the system.
Why would you stay logged in to a key management system?
If you're going to manage it.
Oh, you mean like monitor what's being open and closed?
If you're going to get an alert, then the system has to know.
Just gonna send an alert to your phone.
Right, this has to know who you are. But so login maybe isn't required for things. But if you're going to force lockdown or if you're going to manage the access, you'd have to log into the system.
And the dotted line or the dashed line represents.
So let me undo. If we're not going to have a login for there. What it means is includes. It's so hard to. I just want to get the stupid. There we go. Includes means that to do this requires this. So it shows a kind of a dependency. You have to log in order to be able to force lock or manage the access.
Why we put that broken lines?
It means something different than the other lines. These lines just means that they relate to it. They're using it. These lines mean that they're required. It's required by these. This is there's a word for it, which I'm losing. These are the login is basically these are dependent on the login. There's another word for it which I'm trying to remember. Brain is
It's like set theoretical, right? So every case of forcing lock also is a case of there being a login.
Yes.
Which I mean
includes is the word.
Inclusion is.
Yeah, includes is the word they use. So I'm going to take a text. I just want a text box. Is there a text box here? There's notes. Actually, I think beyond the note, I think if I double click this.
Standard on the left banner, if you scroll up, there's a standard subset of.
Where?
So if you on the left banner, scroll all the way up among your shapes.
Oh.
There's a text box under standard.
Oh, okay. But if you double click them, they also let you label them.
Okay.
And I don't want text there. Does it only let you do it once?
How are you getting the dash line?
I just drew from here to here.
It happened automatically. They went from the secondary to something.
You got that.
Yeah, but I drew them from login to force lock, and that
I
changed.
think what it's doing
Oh,
is if you go from use case to use case, it'll be dashed. If you go from actor to use
You
case,
mouse over the use case, a little red circle appears and you draw it from the red circle.
they got quite a nest in there too again. One of the things, so this is, as I said, how simple these can be, but they can be really useful to get a big picture of what the requirements of a system are. And you would want to do it for every different user, right? That's why they're called use cases. So we identified several users, right? So there was like instructor, there's security, there's admin. So admin is probably where we would do request to access, but we could leave it there. As simple as they are, as I said, they are really, really useful. There's other things you can do that I don't necessarily advocate, but we have several users, right? So I'm just going to name this actor user. I want to show some of the relations that you can do if you really want. And then we have, as types of users, we have, I think I need to move this over or do a different page, might even be better. So we have instructor. We have security. And we have admin. Now, does it do, it's not exactly what I want. Let's see if I can do, where is that line there? Here? That's what I want. Except I maybe want these down farther. I'm trying to make something kind of like inheritance. So let's hook. I don't want to hook to the middle of the body. Oh well. That's really annoying. I want to hook to this outer box. Can I do it there? No.
So the way you change the endpoints is if you're close and it's highlighted in red, the cursor changes to like the cross, and then that means you're already kind of doing that though.
This will work. It's just not what I most wanted to do. Do you guys kind of, from have any idea what that would represent?
An instructor is a user.
Right, an instructor is a user, a security person is a user, an admin is a user. The only reason you might do this as a side is that it represents something you're going to do in your programming code. That you'll create a abstract class called user, and then you'll create child classes called instructor, security, and admin. It shows inheritance. And we'll talk about that when we actually do some coding and we talk about object-oriented principles. Inheritance means that you can create a class that has most of the elements that you're going to need, and then each of these only has the little variations that are necessary for just differentiate an instructor from a general user. This one has the ones that differentiate a security from a general user. Right? Inheritance means that I can put everything that's common here, and I only need to put what's special in these. It saves you a lot of coding. And it's actually a pretty good strategy. So that's another thing you can do in use cases. Does this make any sense so far? I mean, it may not look all that useful, but it is. One of the things that I want to argue against is, one, this is about, you don't want to get too much more complex than this. You don't want to get super complex. Like, you could take all of those users and combine them all into one big use case with all the different arrows going everywhere. But one of the virtues of these is if you can look at them and see it simply, right? To communicate quickly visually. So it's actually probably better to make separate charts for separate users than to try to combine them into one big complicated chart. The other thing is, don't get too fine. Notice I did manage access rather than, because basically what this would include is, add access, or grant access, remove access, all of those things. This kind of handles all of those. It's really good just to get the bigger, higher level uses, how they would use it, rather than get into the detail. Detail will come. We'll get into the detail. But the purpose of this is just to get a big picture of how a system works and what the requirements of it are for each individual kind of user. Right? Does that make sense? You could argue that a student would be a user of this too, because they need access to the room. How do they get?
Theirs is like the null usage.
It is kind of they have to get somebody to admit them, right?
In fact, the requirement of the system is that it not admit them to the room.
Yeah.
Like on their own accord.
On their own accord, yes. Although tutors have cards for the rooms that they tutor.
That's a different user.
Yeah, so that would be a different user. And you would have to figure out, so that would be another case, right? Tutor would be another actor. Typically what you do, and the hard part of this, and then I'm going to show you a little bit about the written part of it, and then we'll probably call it good for today. We'll revisit some of this. The hard part is identifying who the actors are, right? Who are all the different actors? And then looking at each actor and coming up with the main ways that they interact with the system. And it would be good, I mean, if you're really doing this, you should probably look at every actor, come out with their basic use cases. Then one of the advantages of these pictures is you could take it to somebody and say, is this it? Have I missed something? Right? So there's a discussion part of this where you look, what have I left out? And it's a whole lot easier to communicate with these. And again, I would probably do these as separate charts rather than one. And if you want, you can always color these. And if you do color them, what's usually good is to, so these two require locks, so you might want a different color. The usual way would be, these require logins. The usual way would be to color code them, right? So that you have different colors for different kinds of activities. Accessing the room doesn't require a login. So I could go back to the blue.
Could you also use different shapes?
You could do, well, no, actually. Use cases are ovals.
Professor, you mentioned about giving just general ideas for the boxes. But for example, in the future, the students will have access to those cards just to unlock the main doors, not the room.
So you would have to add that, right?
Okay.
So that means that, because these are the rooms, we would have to, and maybe we should do that just to make it more interesting. We would want students, right, as another actor, and some of the doors would be the outer doors. So room might not be, of course we didn't say room, we just said access, right? Although I did say access rooms. Maybe it would be better just to say access door. Because you're right, there is outer, even now, faculty has access probably to the same doors that they'll eventually get students access to. Log in. Let's make it red just for fun. Ooh, that's deep red, but oh well.
I mean, Easter is coming. So.
Yes, yes. So we got our Easter eggs. I think you can also do, I don't know that I want to go there right now. I think you can add shadows. But let's not play with that too much right now. This is useful sometimes, particularly if the colors mean something. It's also nice because a lot of times in a real systems, if you're doing the project, once you've identified the uses, you may want to present these like in a PowerPoint to a group or a small team or something, or present them in a way, and then for the discussion, you know, what have we forgotten about the security? They've got locks, they can force a lockdown, they can manage access, they can access all the doors. These two require logins. What else are we forgetting? And as I said, it's easier to do that.
I thought that receive alerts would require login into the system because that's how you're getting, that's where they're coming from.
Probably. You were saying that they would just get, so they would be in the system. I'm assuming that that's actually a question that we could deal with.
Might always be on for security.
Right. So in a database, you can designate who to send an alert to by a text message. Databases, if you ever become a database administrator, you'll have no life. Because they put you in, the database can alert you when there's something going on in the database. And you could create a system that would alert, but it probably wouldn't alert everybody. It would alert whoever is supposed to be on that day. But I don't know if that would require a login. That's something we could, I mean, that's something for debate. Other questions on these? As I said, these are fairly simple. I'm going to show you a less simple part of it in a second. I'm doing this all on one page, and I'll share the page. Yeah. The color? There's a fill up above. So if you click on something, there's a little paint bucket. So it should give you the colors.
I missed how you wrote that.
Oh, I just double clicked the line.
Oh.
There are lots of other diagramming tools, but as I said, I actually like, I think Lucas Charts does pretty good with these. All right, so let me show you this last little bit, and then we'll call it a day. Even if you're not ready to call it a day, I am.
Yes.
So there's a written part to these. And basically, the thing that would take the most time about these is the written part. So you've diagrammed these. You have the basic idea here. Let's do receive alerts. And I'm doing this all on the same page, but I'll cut them into pictures for the blog, into separate pictures. So do we have a text box here? Somebody said there are text boxes over here.
Yeah,
right?
you can go left sidebar, other
You
side.
can also double click anywhere.
If you go way to the top.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that just happened to me right before you asked.
Oh, wow.
So I have a text box here. There's a written part. So this one, I'm going to say that the use case is receive alerts. And then I'm going to say what
Where's that box?
I just double click into the grid. So the next part, I'm trying to remember of what.
So do you want to be in the box or just on the screen?
On the screen is fine. Initial condition or start condition. Let me make this bigger. And then over. And then up. So what would be cause an alert? We talked about a different.
Fire.
Well, yeah. I'm thinking with the locks in particular.
Oh, it's an attempt at entering a room. Wi-Fi.
What?
All locks.
That's true. We might add that in a moment. I'm just going to say attempt failed.
Access attempt.
Yeah, access attempt failed 3 times. What this is when you take a use case, you kind of write up what the, okay. So the initial condition, and then I'm going to do like the steps. So going to keep writing. Yeah.
Resize the box.
I can, but does it matter? So these are the steps within the system that would be inside that use case. So I'm making this up. You'd have to really think about these. But system identifies a, what do we want to call it? It failed access or whatever. By locate, I just mean in the system there will be a list of people that are active at a given time. Should I put it that way instead?
Did you say on duty security?
On duty
rather than
might.
active?
On duty would be good. So this is going to be fairly simple. And you might say with door and condition, right? To security. So one of the things, depending on how detailed, record time. I don't know about this part, actually. So I would assume if they got an alert, they would have to close it, right? And then the last part of this would be so post whatever happens after this, which I would say is something like that. I'm going to make this bold and this bold and this bold and then this bold. I might have slightly different ones in the assignment. But for every use case, and you might have several of these for a single use case, like there might be a different alert. Is if it's handled any differently, you might want to write up another instance, right? And you'll look, if you look online and if you look at places, these can get much more complex than this, right? But it's sort of what is the use case that you're working with? What is the condition before, that's causing the alert? What are the steps that are involved in resolving this and in sending it? And then what are the conditions after the use case has run its course? Does that make sense? The thing that this does, it's a whole lot more work than drawing the bubbles, but it gives you a sense of what the content of those bubbles is. And again, this is when you start to code things, this stuff is really useful. This stuff should be reviewed also. Everything should be reviewed. Let's do one more, a different one. Force lock. All right. I'll move over and do it beside. Can I move that box? I can turn it. Can I move it? Probably not. There we go. Oh, I have to do this. Okay, so we'll do use case force lock. What would be the initial condition that would cause that?
Emergency situation requires force to be immediately locked.
Yeah, emergency situation. We'll just call it emergency situation. So it could be, now you wouldn't lock all the doors for a fire.
No.
Yeah, emergency.
Emergency lockdown.
Well, so emergency situation that requires lockdown, let's put it that way. How you state this is kind of up to you, although the clearer you could be, the better, right? So if that's the initial condition, I'm just looking, what did I say? The steps were what I had next. It seems like I have, and then the steps are typically numbered. So now the alert for this might not come from the lock system, right?
Correct.
So security would have to, what would be the steps? I'm not sure I'm clear on that.
Would be a call or notification received by
I was
security.
gonna say there'd probably be a point of access within administration or the police. I mean, that would be where I would think it would come from.
Or maybe it just comes from, like the security themselves, like they initiate the whole process.
Security staff or administration or.
So there's actually something that I didn't do here, which you could do. So I don't know if I could draw it here so big. You could put a box around the stuff that belongs to the system, and you can include things that are outside the system. So the emergency alert would probably be from outside the system. I'm going to shrink this just a hair, and then we'll come back to that. I just want to move this a little. Will it move? Should move.
Click out of it. Just right.
Where do I want to put it though? Well, you know, we could, I don't want to cover that. Let's just leave it where it is. I will put over here something like emergency alert or get received. Let's say receive, because they're supposed to be verb. All right. I'm going to delete that. Now, you can do, see how there's a box here, container, it says. If I drag a container on here, this is going to be hard. I could stretch it over all of these, maybe move the actor outside the container. So this is, again, if you're getting more complicated, all of these things are within the system. still kind of a mess. But the emergency alert, which is relevant, isn't part of the system. Does that make sense? So I'm going to make this bigger again. So I'm going to say security receives emergency alert. All right, so that's not in the system itself, but it is what happens. And then the next step would be, I would assume you'd have to log in to do a lockdown. What? Otherwise, yeah.
Or maybe you're already logged in.
Or yeah, you might. So that actually is something that you could do. Emergency situation that requires lockdown. That's actually something. So there's initial. I'm just going to say state. So you could say security logged in is what's required for this. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
One of the things, and that's something I forgot on the other one, but it is something that you often have. What is the state of things just before you do it? What are you assuming? So if you're assuming that they're logged in, if you're assuming that the doors were shut or something, if you're assuming, I'm not sure. So when they have a lockdown, do they actually manually close all the locks? I don't know. But we'll say that they do. So because we're assuming that they're logged in, then they would initiate lockdown. Part of that would probably be, I don't know that this would be in the system itself, but do we want to say campus? Or are we doing it only campus? This would be part of it, campus-wide alert, right? Is it? I'm not sure. What I'm thinking is that they would monitor doors for if they actually were locked, were closed. I mean, if there were open doors. There's nothing there's nothing in this door that'll make it swing shut.
Well, some of them have like magnets against them that hold them open, and then the magnet cuts off and the pneumatic shut.
Yeah, hard stuff, but that might be a good idea.
That's usually just on fire doors, though.
Yeah. Monitor doors for compliance. Okay. I just can't imagine at what point you would lock all the doors. Why?
It's like a active shooter.
Yeah, but I wouldn't want to be locked in this room.
Right.
The door is windows, 2 big windows.
Hurricane.
Yeah, I don't think they would lock you in because you need to be able to get out.
Like a locust.
Yeah.
But most doors don't lock from the inside. I guess I had assumed that doors were not locked from the outside, but they would no longer be openable from halls.
Yes.
You could do that. So that is true. You can open it from the inside. That actually that makes some sense.
But then if there was an active shooter, maybe there are rooms that people would want you would want people to be able to get shelter.
Right.
But then there's no distinction that with the shooter going in there.
So actually, if we ever did have an active shooter, which I hope we never ever have, I don't even know where around here would be a good place to hide.
I didn't go on the second floor.
Yeah, but that's a long ways to go.
The
And
second
you'll
floor
be
is
locked
literally
out.
interesting because that's where like the culinary school is, and that's where like a lot of the like I think the textiles. No, they're in the basement.
They're in the basement. I would, depends on the situation, but I'd probably head out the back stairwell.
Yeah, the hardware.
The upside to this room is that you can, there are 2 exits.
But it has you do have 2 exits, but it has big windows too. Bigger even than this room.
But you have to be an awfully fast sprinter to be aware of both windows.
Yeah. As I said, I just hope it never happens. Is there anything else that would happen in this use case?
You should give them a way to like the alert to expire. So
Right. So we should probably say end alert and release doors, I guess. Release locks. And then the end condition or post condition or post status. Is basically that the system is back. I'm just going to say normal status. Partially because I'm tired. All right. But you get the idea of what these look like. One of the things you'll be happy to know is that I'm not going to, come on, I just want to highlight this to make it bold. I'm not going to make you, I want you to kind of make bubbles for all of the use cases and the actors, but I'm not going to make you write this out for every use case.
Yeah, for the assignment, you only need it for like 2, right?
Right, just 2 for the.
You say make bubbles, you mean like
Well, so what I mean, yeah, so I'll show you kind of here. Probably shouldn't bother formatting. So when we do, so one of the couple of things that the assignment has, and again, we can revisit this. Let me get down a smaller size a bit. All right. So what the assignment would involve is basically identifying all the different actors, like in the food kiosk thing, the McDonald's. There probably won't be as many actors as there are here. But you might have a couple. I mean, you probably want to include an employee in there too, right? And the customer, and possibly a couple others, but there may only be a couple of actors. And then you want to figure out what does the kiosk have to do for a customer? What do they have to be able to do, right? And I'm not going to give you all the ideas, but you could look at them and you could think about it and make balloons, little bubbles for each of those things. So those are that part I want you to do as thoroughly as you can, the diagram part. But I'm only going to ask you to write the written part of the use case. I'm only going to ask that you do a couple of them. Now, if you were really developing this for a system, for a company, they'd probably make you write every one of them, and maybe multiples for some of them. Because there are different kinds of conditions that could be in there, right? Manage access has a couple of different use cases. One is a grant access, another one is revoke access, right? So you might also have grant temporary access. So all of these things, you could have 2 or 3 different use cases written up for that one bubble. And as I said, this stuff may look a little bit silly because it's so simple on some levels with its little stick figures and things, but it is actually, I sometimes do this now when I'm thinking about a piece of something that's a little bit complicated. I'll draw the stick figures and the bubbles. I tend to draw them on paper rather than go to a diagram and think that to figure out in my own mind what are the requirements, what are the big things that I have to pay attention to.
Steve, on the other formatting we did, if we don't go automatically into a database, it's just transferring anything.
This doesn't. This doesn't. This is basically just conceptual, trying to get the overall view of what the software is supposed to do. The more complicated the software, the more necessary this kind of thing is. And again, this screen that I have here is kind of a mess. Typically, this would be one diagram, this would be another diagram. If you're doing this kind of relation for inheritance, you could do this. You can do this among other objects too. If some other objects require kind of an inheritance structure, I don't necessarily think that that applies to use cases. We'll do it more when we do class diagrams, but you can do that in a use case. There's also, there are a couple of other relationships that you can do besides include in here. Again, most of them are kind of fine, and I'm not too worried about getting too fine about it. Just choose a couple to write up to. I think in the assignment I have more of a description. Let's look. So this is the requirements use cases. So I just said pretty much the same thing. The use case name, any preconditions, start point, steps, and post condition. So pretty much the same thing that I talked about there for writing it up. Questions on that? Now, we have a few moments left, we have like 15 minutes. So I'm not going to expect you to do this now. Tuesday is no class because of the walkout. So we'll see where you are on Thursday. Trouble is Thursday, that's a whole week. You guys are going to forget it all. But I'll look at where people are on Thursday, if people have turned it in or not. And I probably will give you some open lab time on Thursday to work on it too. We have time, I think. The use cases are just sort of the beginning of it, and then we'll kind of talk through those too. So, and again, what you can do for turning it in, you can take a picture, like just a screenshot, or you can give me a link to Lucidcharts. The links work pretty good. On your ERDs, if you didn't notice, I did comments on, if I had permission, I did comments on the chart itself. If I didn't, the charts are with the assignment. And there were like 2-3 people that I didn't have permission at all. If you give me the permission, I'll give you the grade for that. Okay, so I think that's it for the day. I'll cut and paste this into the blog. So you'll have those pieces. And I'll also do a link to this in the blog.
For the receive alerts use case,
yeah.
Would the initial condition and the initial state be the same?
Let me look. So you're thinking, well, that's because it's over here. For receive alerts, the initial condition.
And in the state?
Oh, the state would probably be, that the attempt had failed 3 times. Yeah. So if it doesn't, like in the thing I just said, preconditions. You can find online things that will basically be like 3 pages long of things to record about each of these things. Yeah, have a good. Yeah.
Otherwise.
No, so we went down there. Came back afterwards, and he used to stay down there.
I'm local to the hill, so I'm
Uh,
okay with meeting.
So he's like, yeah, we're gonna go and watch a live rock concert down here. That's
So we have probably.
like, so we went
I mean,
to Disney.
Again, we're like, it's always pretty good.
I was very relieved.
Oh, no, they're all templates. Yeah, they're all templates. Yeah, no, I just picked the background, the colors, and on, made it go. No, my only, I did the slide, I did the slide. Because I figured, that color. Yes, what is it? How does it work?
See,
This is your side.
Yeah.
It's your gel, it's just that, it's just.
sure.
So,
That's why I asked you to do it. For some reason, I
That should work. Actually, hit with login, so there's the password.
Yeah, so.
Yeah.
I'm watching my. Yeah. Okay, yeah, me too.
It's not working.
I'm house sitting this morning, so like, yeah.
I tried to see my husband was not
And it's like there right now. And like, yeah, it's just an old wood floor.
So what should I do?
I don't know. You could maybe, so you did it. When you, let's do it again. Actually. I think I might have an idea.
Yeah.
And then don't do next. Go back.
Why don't I create several groups of Postgres I'll share?
And then log in with password, which you can do the same thing, but I'm wondering if they're doing. Try one more time.
Yeah. Okay, I'll go ahead and create that now. That would be great. I'm so tired of doing it.
Yeah.
That now I just take it.
It didn't work. You tried the forgot password.
It's not, I said if I would use that, they would send me my email. No, I can find it on my email.
You might look into your,
Gmail.
well, the one you used here, right? So the, yeah.
I tried that.
But what I was thinking is you might look under your spam.
I was gonna watch it and
Or you could try to do another account because it already exists.
I want
So I'm just looking to see if this is.
yeah. Oh, it's embarrassing. Even though that's my word. No, it wasn't.
Is that your .edu?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not sure. Yeah. You could try to re-register.
Awesome, I see your face. Okay,
No,
yes.
no.
I'll come by and just give you the download of what we've been talking about over here.
So if you enter your email.
No worries.
I didn't see it there. It should be the EDU one. All right, well, that's fine. But I think that it should show up there, but I would use the same address you used to register with it too, which, and do make sure that you write it in there. Yeah.
Try it.
Be okay with us doing blockchain on the 18th? Before you have the other step.
I think so. Yeah, which is kind of soon. Are you guys ready for that?
Yeah, we'll get.
I guess we could do.
I didn't, but if you want to hold it, that's fine. We can do it anytime.
I'm just trying to think of what else I have to find for Thursday.
That was what we're talking about.
Right.
So that's gonna be the weekend on that.
So we could do, I think as long as you guys were like within the 20-minute range, we could probably do it. All right, let's plan on that. And then I would probably do it at the beginning and then let people work on that.
Sure. Okay.
No.
What? Oh, actually, I probably wouldn't. I would probably, if you just do a link to it or whatever. For that. Yeah, I mean, if it's are you doing, basically, I'll just kind of grade it as you do it. If it's a Google Slides, you could just give me the link. If it's PowerPoint, you can just certainly you can.
Because I'm not sure what you want to stress on it, so I want to make sure we cover it.
I hadn't even thought of it as a topic, so.
Yes, that's why. Please feel free to give us some feedback.
Okay.
On the weekend?
Probably, yeah.
Stuff on Sunday.
I do look at stuff on Sunday and Friday, and Monday might be a little. Monday, I'm going to get my brakes replaced.
Brains?
Brains would be a good idea.
I gotta sign up for that. You know, I read this article. There's this drug they can give you to kids, exposure to your brain. They tested seniors with it. They were able to remember as well as 20.
Huh, that would be useful.
That's, so they're trying to figure out who to release this now to. Who gets it? Just the. I think it's called meth. Not presidents. We're not allowing them to get it. Instructors should get it first.
I know my memory is a little bit spottier than it used to be.
Get more sleep.
That's probably actually true. I have a lot of trouble sleeping these days, so.
Yeah, I've been in that mode this week, and I don't know why I can't. I just have to figure out shape to figure it
Yeah, we'll see.
I'll probably.
Yeah, we're gonna learn to
I don't know how the campus are
Which just do you buy? I know Slovakia and salmon. No, I was with I'm just
It's hard to call.
No.
I like to.
I don't, because they put that in class with it. I like to work with themselves and you can find out because it was.